Welcome back, true believers and all you merry Marvelites, to another very interesting episode of Marvel's Avengers 101. So it's been a pretty slow news week recently regarding the game, considering that we don't have too much to go off of after the Hero Week ended with Kamala Khan as Ms. Marvel. However, the game is still being heavily showcased at numerous gaming conventions where the A-Day demo is still available for people to get their hands on, along with some brand new footage which has been leaked at specific gaming related events. Not to mention that there's also some very intriguing statements from the head of the Crystal Dynamics studio of Scott Amos, who is basically analyzing the fan backlash that the game might be receiving. But before we dive into all of that, I do want to go over an upcoming gaming convention which is going to be taking place from October 17th to October 20th, which will possibly showcase some new info about the game relatively soon. And with the most recent gaming convention over and done with PAX Australia, the one that's actually coming up next is none other than EGX, taking place in London. Now, if you do recall, Marvel's Avengers is also teaming up with Virgin Media to add on exclusive in-game items which people will be able to get their hands on if they do partner up with said company once the game does release on May 15th, 2020. And surprise, surprise, it turns out that Virgin Media is actually hosting the entirety of the EGX event. So besides Marvel's Avengers actually showing up during this conference to have the A-Day demo be playable for attendees during the convention, there is a possibility that we could get more information about the Virgin Media partnership during this conference. And while we don't know 100% whether or not we're actually going to get more information about the Virgin Media partnership for Marvel's Avengers during EGX, there is actually a full schedule layout on the Marvel's Avengers Twitter page as to what fans can expect during the convention itself for the game. And as the Twitter page states, EGX 2019 is nearly upon us. Here's what you need to know. Hands-on with Marvel's Avengers at the Virgin Media booth, as well as a Captain America statue photo op. And just like with what happened during PAX Australia, even though it's not going to be the same exact piece of art, if you do manage to actually play the demo at EGX yourself, you will receive an all-new Ryan Brown art print based off the game. But what I find the most interesting about Marvel's Avengers presence at EGX directly is the fact that at the end of the convention, we will receive a Sony stage show on October 18th, as well as an EGX stage Q&A with the developers on October 19th. And like you all know, what I'm about to say is that Marvel's Avengers will in fact be attached with exclusive PS4 benefits that you won't be able to receive within any other console. This is also one of the main reasons why any other time we see Marvel's Avengers playable at any of these conventions, it's always played on a PS4 platform. So whether or not we're actually going to end up learning about these PS4 benefits during the Sony stage show at EGX is still unknown, but just keep your eyes peeled for that date to see if there's any new info revealed. Now, as for the EGX stage Q&A itself, I really hope that they do ask some informative questions that we don't really know about already, considering that there is a lot of info about this game that some people are still a bit unclear about. So if this Q&A manages to clarify some information for everyone interested about this game, I definitely think that's going to be beneficial for everyone in the long run. Now, following this post from the EGX convention as to what we can expect for Marvel's Avengers during that time is actually backtracking a bit to the PAX Australia convention, where they did show off some new footage to everyone there. Now, weirdly enough, the majority of the time is that the A-Day demo is the main focus of Marvel's Avengers at all these gaming related events. But for whatever reason, they actually decided to showcase some completely new footage of the game in action during PAX Australia, which actually showcases what the war table looks like in action. Now, as you should know by now, Marvel's Avengers is a fully layered game with a complete single player campaign, as well as a multitude of online missions which you can play with your friends in 4-player co-op. Now, you can also play these co-op missions, which are titled as Warzone missions, in a single player manner if you want to, but they do actually encourage you to play it with your friends online. And while you will be able to find these missions scattered throughout the explorable hub worlds within Marvel's Avengers, you will be actually able to access what's called a war table with your base of operations at the crashed helicarrier site. And thanks to a certain user on Reddit who did manage to capture footage of this in action during PAX Australia himself, we do get a quick glimpse as to what the war table is going to look like within the game. Now, if you do want to learn more about the specifics as to what the leaked war table footage actually shows off, I will leave a link in the description to one of my awesome online buddies, Lejeune, who does a full breakdown as to what we see in these pictures. But if you want a quick description on my part, it does remind me of the Normandy map that we do have in the Mass Effect games, where you can choose which planet you want to go to and also select what type of mission you want to partake in. And based on what the developers have said in the past is that you can zoom into a specific region of the world and take on new hero missions and Warzone missions at your own desire, but also zoom out of the world to try and locate different areas that you can explore. So as we've said numerous times, this game will not be an open world game like what what Spider-Man PS4 was, but it will have a multitude of expansive hub worlds that you can explore, which will offer different areas of the Marvel Universe to look into. And based on the locations that we know of so far with San Francisco and New York, I'm sure that we're gonna get even more massive Marvel locations like Wakanda, and possibly even Outworld locations like that of Asgard. However, even though this is pretty important footage to look into about the game, it makes me a little bit concerned and a bit agitated towards Square Enix as to why they're keeping all of this secretive instead of just posting this all to the public. Believe it or not, there's still a good amount of people who are still confused as to whether or not the Avengers project is a fully open world game. And considering that this leaked war table footage as well as previous statements from the developers themselves completely debunked that statement, I just wish they would make more of the game public for everyone to actually look into. And because of this confusion and potential distance that gamers are putting between themselves and the game directly, it actually leads into a very interesting article that Scott Amos was a part of discussing fan backlash towards the Avengers project. Now within this article, we do get a very thorough and intriguing discussion between Scott Amos and the interviewer, basically going over how Crystal Dynamics have actually dealt with fan backlash in the past relating to their Tomb Raider games. And surprisingly enough, even though the initial trailer for Marvel's Avengers did put off some individuals based on the newer interpretation of the characters, it turns out to be a lesser situation than what happened relating to Tomb Raider. And based on the article itself and Scott Amos' own words, it states, when Crystal Dynamics took on the reboot of Tomb Raider, it got more than it bargained for. After revealing the new look for Lara Croft, studio head Scott Amos told me the company received death threats. So when it came time to create new, unique versions of the iconic Marvel characters, Amos and his team were prepared for backlash. It was a case of simply ripping off the band-aid, as Amos puts it, and getting the designs out there for fans to come to terms with. Coming up against the Marvel Cinematic Universe was always going to be a challenge, as fans have gotten used to the film versions of these characters over the past 10 years. However, Amos believes that he and his team have created characters that players will take ownership of. When he speaks of the MCU, Amos speaks fondly, calling it a brilliant 10 years that opened an entirely new world into Marvel and these stories. But he adds that there have been 80 years of Marvel, and the MCU has only been the last 10 years. With that in mind, Crystal Dynamics is comfortable putting its own spin on the characters and trying to do something different. Creating all new looks for the Avengers was also important for another reason: customization. In Marvel's Avengers, players can unlock or buy costumes for the characters. One that Amos points to specifically is the Joe Fixit costume for the Hulk. If in the game he looked like Mark Ruffalo's Hulk from the MCU, Amos says putting him into the Joe Fixit costume just wouldn't look right. By putting these characters in costumes, upgrading them, and playing with them, Amos and Crystal Dynamics believe that players will take ownership and see these Avengers as their Avengers. Amos is hoping people will play Marvel's Avengers and instead of MCU, they'll think MC who? Amos also remembers that Stan Lee once told him that any comic could be somebody's first, and even Marvel's Avengers could be the first time someone meets these characters. They have to grab you right away so you can fall in love with them. And to finalize the article, it states, so far so good, as Marvel's Avengers looks incredible at this early stage. And as we all know by now, it will be available for PC, PS4, and Xbox One, as well as Google Stadia on May 15th, 2020. So based on the article alone, as well as Scott Amos' statements, it definitely seems like he and the rest of the team working on this game are extremely passionate about trying to make the best game possible. Sadly, even though it does seem like the excitement from the team is at an all-time high, it's not really doing too much justice through the marketing department, considering that they're only focusing on the A-Day demo and nothing else. And for me personally, I already knew since day one that the Avengers project was going to be a completely different interpretation of the characters compared to that of the MCU, considering that that's the same thing that Spider-Man PS4 did. Although, even though they are trying to differentiate themselves from the MCU in terms of their designs, everything that we do know about the story so far does recall a lot of elements from the previous movies. So hopefully the statements that Scott is making do ring true by the time the full game does release next year, with a completely all new and original story with fresh takes on the characters that we all know and love. And until that time comes, everyone, that's the video I have for you today, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. What do you think about these updates towards Marvel's Avengers, and what are you looking forward to about the game next? I'm really hoping that we do get some more information about the game that isn't related to A-Day during the Sony presentation during EGX, so fingers crossed that something new does happen during that time. But until then, everyone, thank you all so much for watching, stay merry Marvelites, and peace out.
The fact that she's the entry point character in this game makes so much sense because she really is the everyman. Like, people from all backgrounds and experiences can relate to her and have related to her since her inception. So it makes perfect sense for her to be bringing you into the Marvel Avengers game experience.